Hey kids, do you like wrestling? Well, we like wrestling too. We are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Myself and Chris Novembrino kind of doing a lazy river of wrestling criticism, going through the news and whatever happened in stateside television wrestling. And also, you know what? Sometimes we just like to watch old stuff and talk about that too. Love for you to give us a listen. If you haven't already, we are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So fast to finger down. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for December 12th, 2023. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all called podcast platforms and applications. You could follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red box as a sponsor of this podcast, and you can set up a one-time you can set up a donation one time or reoccurring, no obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joining alongside, as always, Case Lowe. In case we were kind of catching up off air. It's been a long few weeks for both of us, but how are you doing right now, buddy?
Oh, brother, I'm good. I'm good. You know, last week, I think I said this 2 weeks ago, but, you know, last week is my busiest working week of the year. Your personal life, as in your home, just about crumbled to the ground last week. So I know you were planning on doing an episode that didn't end up working out. That's, you know, that happens. I know just a fraction of what went on with you, and I don't blame you for not doing a wrestling podcast with the limited time that you had. But I'm glad to be back.
My house is haunted. I think that's the long and short of it, and I'm up to basically 5 plumbers, 3 foundation people, and general contractors on call trying to figure out what's up with my house. But I do want to give a special note of thanks to Mark, aka Guts Dozer. He was on call for us trying to get together and do a special voice gate. Mark does a lot of the great YouTube content with Dragongate, and it just did not work out for me, and it's solely on my end with that, with my house and everything like this. But it seems like we are getting through that. At least I kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel, and we might know how this house is haunted. This is why I get Case for having a house that I jokingly called that had a murder garage, a garage that I thought was haunted. And I shouldn't have said that from the start because I just cursed myself, basically.
Yeah, no, it sounds awful. It's a bummer for me. I was looking forward to actually listening to an episode of VoiceGate. I you know, sometimes we'll go back and listen to the things we do, but I was all excited that you were going to have a guest on last week that I was going to be able to consume and give opinions on, and that did not happen. But again, bigger fish to fry, and now the Dream Team's back, baby. We got a lot to talk about.
And speaking of Dream Teams, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Dream Teams, maybe not a Dream Team, but let's just lead off with this case. The Tokyo Sports Awards. I was going to make some joke about the Saito twins.
We do this every year. Tokyo Sports Awards on the Open the Voice Gate podcast. It's an event. We have opinions. We're upset. We're flustered. It's what we do.
Yeah, so earlier today, Tokyo Sports announced the 2023 Tokyo Sports Awards. Of course, this is the one that is voted on by the Tokyo Sports staff. And interestingly enough, over the last few years, we've kind of seen a consolidation with these awards. And the consolidation continues as for now, the third year running Dragongate is completely shut out of any categories. The MVP is Tetsuya Naito. Not a realistic possibility there for Dragongate, but best tag team and newcomer awards kind of seem a little bit like what are we here, Chop Liver, guys?
Yeah, well let's go through these because obviously Dragon Gate podcast, but you and I have opinions on this sort of stuff. Like you said, MVP this year was Tetsuya Naito, second place Hiromu Takahashi, third place Sonata, and fourth place, getting nominated but getting no votes, was Kano. Other than maybe a Will Ospreay snub here, I don't have any issues with that. I mean, it's interesting that Sonata did so poorly, but it's Sonata. That's kind of what I expect.
Yeah, and it's something for me at least. I think everyone was all right giving Sonata a little bit of a leash. I think for people that kind of, it's very easy to just immediately walk right off Sonata, but like there was legitimate reasons for Sonata, and it's something where the fact that the whole entire year kind of being based around him and he's not even making it through the ballots is a little bit surprising. I have to say, even though she ended up injured towards the tail end of the year, especially during the 5-star Grand Prix, a little surprised that Tom Nakano didn't receive a nomination.
Can I ask you a random big picture Japanese wrestling question?
Oh, these are my favorite kind of questions. Yeah, what's up?
When Keiji Muto hits his head on the pillow late at night in his palace, I'm sure, who do you think he's more proud of, Sonata or Kai?
Oh, man.
Yeah, right?
I think that there's a good kind of thing to be said that it's maybe Kai. Because Kai kind of like forged his own path. Like he kind of shook it off and did his thing,
Yeah, and became legitimately very good.
Well, I mean, more so he was able to make money for himself. That's
true.
I feel like that's more that what Muto would say. But for us, yeah, no, I would say that the growth that Kai made outside of Wrestle 1 is so much greater than Sonata after.
I think the most washed opinion in wrestling, like the biggest eye roll I get is anybody that makes fun of Kai. Because I just think you're just not paying attention if you're not. And I'm not saying he's Toshiaki Kawada. I'm not saying he's Muto in 2001. But anybody that in 2023 going into 2024 has the like eye roll, like, ugh, Kai, I don't want to. It's like, what are you talking about? The guy's great. Guy's a contracted Dragon Gate wrestler now. He fits right in with the promotion. He's been around for 5 years now, which is almost sickening to think just because of time. But he has done so much in the last 5 years that has impressed me. And I was somebody who was number one in the Kai hate squad for a very long time. I don't know. Sonata's obviously been the IWGP champion all year. I haven't enjoyed anything he's done. He's not a wrestler I've cared about in many, many years. And I don't know. Sonata's peaked higher, but I feel like Kai's had the better career.
And I think that I'm someone that like there's a certain romance to me about someone who's able to go in and do a lot of different things. I guess like my favorite wrestler of all time is Terry Funk. I still believe that he's the greatest wrestler of all time. And a lot of that is the fact that he lived in so many different wrestling timelines and did so many different things. And to me, Kai, like, say what we will about his Onita phase, but like, I don't think he was that bad of a deathmatch wrestler, or at least that style of FMW style wrestler. We saw him as a junior in All Japan. I think like he was pretty fine with that. And I just kind of look at Sonata and I feel like if this is what we're really seeing out of Sonata, given his career and how things were really positioned for him, I think you have to walk away thinking better of Kai in 2023 than of Sonata 2023 if you're looking at it from that sort of angle.
Well, I think this is like, we deal with this in sports sometimes. It's like, Zion Williamson will probably be looked at as a disappointment because he was the number one pick in the draft, even if he has a better career than Tyrese Halliburton. Maybe that's a bad example, but Sonata will be looked at as an underachiever for his entire career. Kai will be looked at as an overachiever, because I think where Kai was at one point in Wrestle 1 as this real bottom of the barrel sort of embarrassing champion to where he is now, that's a huge success story. And Sonata, I gave up years ago, but I still think everybody is just kind of waiting on that, like, when's he going to be the guy? He's the champion, yes, but when is he just going to, be an unstoppable force at the top of the card? And I think people now realize that's not ever going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that it is something that there will be people who will forever think that it's going to be Kai's year. That, like, Kai's year in the G1 kind of was a little bit of a joke for a little bit. That
Sonata's here in the G1. I wish Kai was in the G1. That'd be great.
Kai in the G1, like, imagine Kai in that C block. You know?
Oh God, yeah. A little Kai Tamatanga 3.5-star match in Nagoya. Just I was like, it's kind of sneaky good. It's like one of the 7 New Japan matches that the Segunda Keita guys will watch all year, and they're like, when you think about it was actually the best match of the year. It's the best match I've seen since this 6-minute Tajiri match. Kind of that vibe.
Yeah, but like it's something where I think because Kai went pretty heavily from being like, he was a junior wrestler for a good portion of his time before Wrestle 1. So I feel like that the expectations were so different for him. And because of that, there's still people who have that expectation of Sonata, that like sometimes some guys are just not that guy. And I think that it's something that New Japan has a very interesting kind of next decade of trying to figure out who's the guy, who is not the guy, who is a guy, and who's just the guy. And it is something where with Sonata that people are still thinking that he's going to be a capital G guy when he's just a guy.
Well said. Match of the Year Tokyo Sports Awards. The winner was Shinsuke Nakamura versus Great Muta. Also receiving votes, Omega versus Ospreay from Wrestle Kingdom, Miyahara versus Nakajima from Noah and Korakuen Hall, Naito versus Okada from the G1, Marufuji versus Ospreay from Noah, and Hiromu Takahashi versus Fujita Junior Hayato from Michinoku Pro. Any thoughts on this?
I think expectation was that best match, most notable match is usually what it translates to. Surprised that it did Great Muta versus Shinsuke Nakamura versus Keiji Muto versus Tetsuya Naito, but I guess since Naito already got the MVP award, they weren't going to give it to him for that one. So it made sense to go for Great Muta versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Do love to see the junior Hiromu love.
Yeah. It's oddly enough, it was a match that I thought was a little disappointing. I thought there were a lot better Fujita Junior Hayato matches this year, but it is nice to see that, and I wouldn't have batted an eye at Omega Ospreay or Miyahara Nakajima. I mean, I don't even know if I watched the Muto Nakamura match. It just, the thought of it was so putrid. I don't know if I ever gave it a look, but I'm also not surprised that it won. I mean, few years, 2015, Okada and Tenryu won. Now, granted, Okada Tenryu was a legitimately great match, but it was the same sort of vibe as Nakamura Muto.
Yeah, it's just whenever you see best match, you go in your head, okay, what you really mean is most notable, like what would be the one on the cover of the magazine of the year, and you go with that one. And as long as you have that mindset, you'll never get disappointed with this category.
I said this in the Discord. I can tie this into Dragongate here real quick. I said this in the Voice of Wrestling Discord. I think when the Hiromu Hayato match came out, I am really disappointed with Hiromu as a touring wrestler. And we saw it with him and Yamato at Kobe World this year. And I use the example of, like, you think about when Liger used to go around, and Liger would work Noah, and he would work Michinoku Pro, and he would work Osaka Pro. And Liger outside of New Japan was an entirely different beast than New Japan Liger. And both of them were great. But honestly, I always preferred, Liger and Noah or Liger and Osaka Pro, because he was just
such a tremendous prick coming into these promotions. Yeah.
I mean, the Liger Osaka Pro stuff, if you've never seen it, I mean, that's some of the best work of his career. And I would say the Noah work might be the best Liger run I've ever seen. I'd put it right up there. And Hiromu, he just doesn't have that. Like when he's in Dragongate or when he's in Michinoku Pro or if he's in America, he's just doing lesser Hiromu matches. He's not doing anything different, and he did so many of them this year. I think it was a real missed opportunity because he started off the year as like, oh my God, Hiromu's back. And Mike, you know better than anybody. I've been a quiet Hiromu hater for many years, and this year he turned me, and I was like, all right, he's back. Screw the neck injury. This guy's figured out how to work again with the current state of his body. In the second half of the year, he showed up at all these promotions, and I never loved those matches the way that I wanted to because I thought he was just a little bit boring as an invader.
Yeah, and like the funny thing is the promoted Hiromu match is the one with Fujita Junior Hayato, and Fujita Junior Hayato case I think so highly of his 2023, and because he has kind of been that touring guy in a lot of ways, and whenever he has shown up on shows, I've always if it is either Dragongate, GLEAT, or other Michinoku Pro, or he's always brought in for the big all-together shows, he always sticks out as like the traveling star, much more so than Hiromu does, I feel like.
Was the All-Star Junior Festival show this year or last year?
It was this year.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, he was, first of all, holy shit. That, oh my God, that feels like it's about 10 years
2023.
ago.
2023. That was
Christ.
April. I was already in this cursed house when that show happened.
Oh my God. Well, he was great on that show. That's why I brought it up. You could have told me that was 2019. I would have been like, oh, that sounds right. I couldn't remember if it was this year or if it was 5 years ago. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that like I feel like this year has really felt like the year that has gone by super fast, but also I go back through my notes and go like, oh yeah, Case, we had Rey de Parejas come back this year.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of Rey de Parejas, Tag Team of the Year, this went to Bishamon, Hiroki Goto, and Yoshihashi, which sure, fine, whatever. Saito Brothers also got votes. Team 200 Kilogram, which is Chihiro Yashimoto and Yu, received a vote. Astronauts of Takuya Nomura and Fuminori Abe nominated and received no votes. And then it also looks like House of Torture and Suwama and Hideki Suzuki were also in there. So this is really the first one where you go, not even a Dragon Gate nomination. You don't want to throw Susumu and Kanda in there at all. And I guess I should throw it to you real quick. Why is it that Dragon Gate gets snubbed routinely in these awards?
Oh, Dragon Gate, pick up a copy of Tokyo Sports.
Yeah.
Like that's really what it comes down to. Like, it's not necessarily a thing where you go like to like Weekly Pro. Weekly Pro, there are people that still like cover Dragon Gate with that. Tokyo Sports isn't. It's just one of those things that Dragon Gate's based in Kobe, and whereas the conglomerate promotions who do a whole lot of advertising in these things, it just kind of has turned into a certain thing where the fact that the Saito brothers got the win there and Yuma Aoyagi got the win there, got win as well. So two non-conglomerate winners. That's kind of where it went this year, So it's just Dragon Gate has never done traditionally very well in Tokyo Sports, especially after the advent of Cyberfight. Usually Dragon Gate would get one award win each year just as they kind of piece it out throughout there. But since Cyberfight and Bushiroad bought Stardom, that has not been the case.
Continuing on here real quick, Outstanding Performance Award. This went to Hiromu Takahashi, Kano Sanada, and Jake Lee also received votes. Jake Lee, remember him? That's I wonder how Noah's feeling about that acquisition right now.
Jeez, like that is someone that like sparks a mini boom for All Japan, then gets the belt taken off him, then All Japan goes back down, leaves, has a business with him was not great, but it did feel like something at least. And then God, he just looks like he dresses like someone that would be like a backup dancer for like a Dave Navarro music video. Like
I am not going to quote what Rich Craich said about Jake Lee in the Voices of Wrestling Slack today, but did you see what Rich said Jake Lee looks like?
Let me pull this up right now.
It's excellent. It's good stuff. While you're looking that up, look, I've got some I don't want to call it a scoop, but I've got some info on pro.
Oh, geez. I did not even bother hitting my cough button and leading up to that. I'm gonna make sure that one of the things I always do is have something that deletes out the silence for us. No, I'm making sure that just weird noise I just made.
Like, I feel bad for people that don't write for the website. That was a spicy little comment Rich left that I will not be reading on the air. I don't want it attributed to me in any way.
Just sassy.
Yeah, we'll talk about Noah later in relation to Dragongate and just the state of that promotion, which some people are talking about the Noah bounce back they had this year. We will not be doing that on this podcast. I think we're a little bit more tuned in, but that's okay. No disrespect to the people tweeting about Stardom's sustained business and Noah's bounce back. That's not going to be on this podcast. Real quick, just rounding out here, Fighting Spirit Award, which normally goes to a Dragongate guy. This year, it went to Kano, Jake Lee, Yuma Aoyagi, and Kazuhika Nakajima also received votes. Your Technique Award winner was Sho. After it wasn't.
Yuma. It was Yuma Aoyagi.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. It was Yuma. The way it was listed to your show was first. It was Yuma Aoyagi, which is well-deserved. He was a top 10 wrestler for me this year. Sho received votes, which was laughable. And then Newcomer Award. No, it wasn't Ryoya Tanaka. And the same way that in 2020, it wasn't SB Kento. It was a team who had wrestled 75 matches over 2 years going into this year. The Saito brothers somehow win the Newcomer Award with Bolton Oleg, Ryoya Oiwa, and Zones receiving votes as well.
Yeah. Hey, when you send your big, muscular former sumo twin tag team around the country and basically let them never get beat, you'll make them you'll forget those 75 matches, Case.
Oh boy. I mean, I'm glad they figured something out. I mean, look, I've watched more Saito brothers this year than I had the prior 2 years, and there was certainly some stuff there that I enjoyed, but I don't think they qualify, and even if they did, there's a lot of Ryoya Tanaka talk coming up later in this podcast, and if you're not all in on him, that conversation is going to be very annoying.
Yeah. I have to say, though, Oiwa ahead of Bolton. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with the voters on that. I do not watch enough Evolution Joshi to say if Zones is the best one there.
Well, Mike, let me tell you all about Evolution's Joshi.
Okay, yeah. What you got?
God, I mean, where to begin? I don't even want to talk about it because that'll be the podcast. We'll be doing the Evolution's Joshi podcast tonight. Let me ask you before we talk about Dragongate.
Yeah,
I have one more. I had a thought today, a random thought, and I want to know your opinion on it as it pertains to the state of Japanese wrestling.
Sure thing. Go right ahead, bud.
Okay. We've got the Tokyo Dome City Hall GLEAT show coming up on December 30th, and I think you and we should do a preview of that next week, and we should talk about it after the show happens because it's a big show with a lot of ex-Dragongate guys. I know you and I will have thoughts on it. I'm dying to see what that show does because what did they do earlier this year? They're like 2,000 people. Is that about right?
Their highest attendance, it was the most they got up to 2,000 at the GLEAT version Mega Sumo Hall show, but in that building, the most they got was 1,200 for Tokyo Dome City Hall, to my knowledge, off the top of my head.
Yeah, let me double check. I thought the show they did there this summer, I thought did really well for their standards. So I just want to double check real quick before I throw this at you.
1279. That
1279. Okay. Oh. Okay. All right. Well, let me still throw this in your direction. So if GLEAT, let's say they do 2,000 fans at Tokyo Dome City Hall or whatever, and Noah were to run that same building, and Noah were to exclusively use Noah talent. So, they get Kano, they get Shiozaki, they get, if you want to throw like a Manabu Soya in there, they get all those guys, but Noah can't use any outsiders. They can book whatever they want, but fully homegrown Noah talent. What draws more, this upcoming GLEAT show on 12:30 or a homegrown Noah show in Tokyo Dome City Hall?
Gosh, that's a hard one to pick, man. Okay, so can they be homegrown people who've come back, or do they have to have been under consistent full-time Noah contract?
What's your example? Who are you asking about?
I'm assuming that like I'm not going to have any issues with like Go or like Kataru, right?
No, well, Go for sure, because Go works there. I don't.
I was thinking.
Has Suzuki done? No, I don't think Suzuki's done
no,
this year.
No, I was blanking for a second. There.
Yeah.
I think it will probably still be. I mean, it's not as strong. I think that it's the weaker Tokyo Dome City Hall show that GLEAT's had this year. Like, I think the show that they had this summer was bigger than this one. I guess, yeah. I think Noah barely beats GLEAT in that. So probably about 1,300.
And what is it? Go versus Kano for the GHC belt? That's probably the biggest match they have right now.
Oh yeah, it has to be Go versus Kano. Yeah. Because if you don't have Go there, then we're really probably then GLEAT's probably going to beat them. I think, honestly.
Yeah, like you can't screw up that main event.
Right.
God, I gotta say, I completely forgot until I read it yesterday that GLEAT did T-Hawk versus Tamura at Sumo Hall this year. I just completely forgot that already happened. And then they did T-Hawk, and now that you're going to run it back, and Tamura's probably going to win, which I think he should. I think that'd be a good move. But I like, in the same way that I had to ask you when the All-Star Junior Festival was, the GLEAT Sumo Hall show, it men in blacked from my mind as soon as it happened. I was hit with the zapper, and it was
the
erased.
Rest of the industry should have zapped themselves in the head after that show. I mean, we discovered like what all it was going to take for Shima to show his whole ass to the entire wrestling industry. You know, like
2,200 fans in Sumo Hall is not a good look.
Yeah. I think that for someone like Hiromu Takahashi, that should have taken any MVP vote possibility out of the mind. Like the fact that he was on that show, you know?
God, this is like a show in 5 years we're gonna look back on. I mean, Minoru Suzuki and Shinya Aoki versus Fujita Hayato and Yu Iizuka.
And they just like completely overwhelmed. I remember this double match. They completely overwhelmed Iizuka. Like it was not, and it was not like a good kind of overwhelm.
No, because nothing in this promotion is actually productive.
Yeah. I mean, like
if
that's
a guy
the thing.
gets beat up, he just gets his ass kicked. Like there's nothing else to it.
Yeah. Like that's like the wild thing about about that whole like show was like at the end of the day, what they had was Kota Ibushi beat up all of the people that Shima commenced to jump, basically.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, Ibushi pinned Ashita in the final pinfall.
Awful, like that. And I'm now thinking about the Diamond Egotus incident case, and this show is just like one of those wild ones. Yeah. Tatsuya Izuchi breaks someone's jaw, still loses an MMA fight.
Well, then it's like Shima, Kazuyashi, Minoru Tanaka versus Atsuki Aoyagi, Hiromu Takahashi, and Jun Tancho. I think that show, if that match existed on any other show, I would have been super into it. But it just felt so hollow on that show in particular. It's just like
the fact that like Tancho was involved. If it was like if you toss in like Takanori Ito or like El Lindemann in their case, you toss El Lindemann in there, you're totally fine about that on this show. But the fact that it's these six guys on this show is what makes it sad.
And I like Tancho, but
I love Tancho.
The whole thing is just what an uncomfortable show. I completely forgot they had already done that main event of T-Hawk and Tamura, and now they're going to run it back next week. And we'll talk about that because I think it's an interesting show, and it's very interesting. I think a lot of different people have a lot of different vibe checks for where they're at. Like, there are people that are super into Kento and Takuma still as a tag team. And I don't, look, I hope I don't get labeled as like, I have an issue with them because they left Dragongate. I don't give a shit that they left Dragongate. I think they've lost the plot as humans, and I worry about their future as a successful wrestling tag team. Thus, I'm way less excited for their match than I should be. And there's matches like T-Hawk and Tamura and Ashita versus Yamamura, which I know both you and I are not into in the slightest. It's just a very interesting show, and I think a lot of different people are either looking forward to different things or not looking forward to different things on that one.
Yeah, and it's something where like you come out of that and like no matter what, and as that company goes into 2024, do we see anything like really ever changing for them as how it's constructed? No, no,
No,
it's just
that's always my thing with them.
yeah, and you kind of just like take a moment where you like look at all of this and you look at like how it's constructed. You bring in Hikaru Shida, you bring in Hikaru Shida to team with Maya Fukuda, who refuses to wrestle, and so you have to do like a legit UWF match, and you go up and down the show, and at a certain point, you're just going like, okay, you're bringing in Eichmann Jiro because Cutler and Cabana are on this show. What are we doing here?
I completely forgot about that.
And I saw like, and I saw like I've not been super online at all for the last week or so. I saw like folks going like, "Oh, Sheamus bringing back the Magic with a 4-way 6-man tag," and I caught that. And it's like, it's cool like a 6-man tag is happening, but like let's not get things twisted about what this really is when you have a 12-man tag match that has Harley Jackson and Tomoaki Hanma in it. Like let's not get it twisted here. Like there's just a lot of things that I find very kind of not like perversely interesting, but just like just like as like an observation, like what made people think like SBK and Takuma that like this is how they should be presented at this point. Like
I'm stunned. I'm stunned they're not wrestling each other. I said that after their debut. I really thought they'd be on this show in a singles match. And, they booked him in what could be a great match, but I'm not there mentally with it.
Yeah, like that's the wild thing about this case. Like we are so much more, like when we look at that tag match, we're both more excited about Kazma and Czech. Much more excited.
Yeah. No, you and I are presidents of the Czech fan club. I'm trying to break that guy out of there, get him in All Japan.
Yeah. Well, wanted to see what happens if we can get Czech in US.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I watched Mochizuki work two matches in the U.S. and people didn't care about him. I don't know if Czech Shimatani is really going to move the needle at all, even though he should.
Even though he should.
I didn't think much of the common American wrestling fan before 2 weekends ago, but God bless the state of Iowa. God bless Slipknot and the Wrestling Revolver crowd. I mean, credit to Wrestling Revolver for bringing in Mochizuki, but boy, did they not care about him up until he essentially shoot-punched Mike Bailey in the face.
Yeah, shoot-punched Mike Bailey in the face, ending the match, and I was just like, all right. It actually made Masaki Mochizuki more cool in my book's case. For like what? And it's very hard for him to be even more cool, Like, cracked it.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. I mean, we had that scheduled for the bottom of the show, but we'll talk about the current Dragongate stuff in just a second. But Mochi worked Wrestling Revolver, and he worked West Coast Pro. I tried really hard to get him a Chicago booking. It did not happen just due to financial situations. I said a few weeks ago on the podcast, I talked to a Midwestern wrestling promoter, not somebody affiliated with promotion in Chicago, but somebody that books in the Midwest. Respected promoter, runs a nice business, and is well aware of how talented Masaki Mochizuki is. And I had a one-on-one conversation with this guy about Mochizuki coming to the U.S., and he was like, great, love it. Our audience is not going to care. And he asked me what the rate was, and I gave him, what I thought Mochi was asking, at least what, the number we heard. He goes, nope, not where. I love the guy. Would love to book him. Can't do it for that sort of money. Crowd's not going to care about him. And, obviously didn't end up on the show that they ran. So, he worked Wrestling Revolver versus Mike Bailey in what I would call a legitimate dream match. And then West Coast Pro Wrestling against Brian Keith. And both were enjoyable. I thought the speedball match was a little bit better, but it really showed like Dragongate has no footprint in America. They do not get any sort of pull whatsoever.
Yeah, it just really, and I know Mark was at the West Coast show, and I think I caught him in the crowd being like one of like the 5 people like leading the Mochi call during his entrance theme, and it was one of those things that I think it really kind of shows us like it ain't 2012 anymore, basically. And I really enjoyed the Brian Keith match. Like, case it was a Masaki Mochizuki match in America based around punching someone in the stomach. Like, it is my favorite kind of thing to watch with Masaki Mochizuki. But Yeah, well, when this went from something where initially it looked like that he had kind of like a wider calendar, and it kind of curtailed into the more as it kind of got closer just into these this 1 week and these two shows, and right back to Japan, it kind of became very clear, like stuff that we were kind of feeling throughout the last DG and USA series as well, just how little purchase there kind of is right now for the Dragon system amongst at least American indie fans.
Yeah, and I don't know, how to rectify that. I'd like to see somebody that's not a Shun, that's not a Yamato, that's not a Mochizuki go over there and spend time in America the way that like Mao did for DDT. But I also I think maybe Mao gained fans, but I don't think there is an insurgence of DDT fandom. I think less English speakers are watching DDT than maybe ever before. So I don't know what to do. I was thinking about that in relation to just where Japanese wrestling was at 10 years ago, because we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of Mochi versus Yoshino, which kind of blew my mind to think about. And if you go back to that time, it's like, one, I think it was still cool to be a hardcore wrestling fan that watched wrestling. I think there was more discourse on wrestling itself rather than scoops with a Z. And that certainly hurts things, because right now scoops with a Z is kind of the cool thing to be into. I also think, you go back 10 years, New Japan World had just launched. They launched at the end of 2014, and no other promotion had a paywall. So you were watching it on Daily Motion. You were watching it because of Real Hero, rest in peace. And so everything was just a lot more accessible. And now everyone has a paywall. Everybody has a different thing. You could argue outside of Wrestle Universe, which we've heard people go, Wrestle Universe is actually too good. People don't go to DDT shows because Wrestle Universe is so great. But there's issues with World. There's issues with the Dragongate Network. It's just, there's not a convenient way to watch Japanese wrestling, even as we progress into people's, it being a more normalized thing, there being English commentary. It's just harder to break that seal. And even though you and I might love the idea of the investment of Dragongate going to America and trying to break in, even if it's working with a GCW or a Black Label Pro, promotions that you and I don't typically like, I wonder if it's even possible anymore. It seems like now is the hardest time to do it compared to any other version of the U.S. independent wrestling scene as we know it.
Yeah, and it's something where I think you kind of look at this, and who's kind of like the test case, and this is not me picking on her or her fans, that kind of is like the test case of like, this is kind of what it is right now, especially about people flying into the United States. It's Maki Ito. Like, I think that we've seen that Maki Ito over the years, and really over the last like 18 months, where she's now basically full-time in the US. Like, at this point, she does do a lot of Tokyo Joshi Pro, but when's the last time you've heard about like Maki Ito and Tokyo Joshi Pro? Like, it's something where you kind of transcend that and you depart and you kind of go that way, I feel like. And I feel like that's kind of the path that, like, because you brought up Mao, and I feel like that kind of is a thing where like Mao got more interested in Mao gigs, like when Rina Yamashita comes over, there's more interest in Rina Yamashita. There's not more interest in freedoms. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, God, I mean, if I was a Japanese wrestler that wanted to get out of Japan, now's the time to do it, because you work a few American gigs, and if you catch on, you can get out of there and make some money. But as a promotion trying to break in, I don't think it's a realistic venture right now.
Yeah, or it's a thing where like you see how Prestige is, you do it jointly with like Prestige and Tokyo Joshi doing the Combat Princess show, or how GCW and everything with like DDT and Tokyo Joshi through that is like through like those things. But I don't think you have something where we reenact 2006 through 2010 all over again. I just don't think that environment is possible because of just various different ways of how wrestling consumption has changed and just logistics. It just does not necessarily fully make sense. And also another case in point of that, like, just not further going in on the Joshi scene, but there's a reason why like you see a lot of these kind of fly-by-night Joshi-focused promotions pop up. And that's not because of the strength of the promotions like Stardom and Tokyo Joshi Pro. It's being able to get wrestlers beyond that. And I think that tells you a lot about the state of things.
Yeah, I ultimately think it comes down to this, which is that, if GCW announced a WrestleMania weekend and they had Bloodsport and they had Spring Break and they had, the human garbage can Effie, they had his show, and then they did GCW versus Dragongate as a feature show, I think that would be the worst selling of the bunch of whatever the GCW party pack is, the Billy Starks Dream Match Produce show. I think that's going to draw more than GCW versus Dragongate, and I just think that's the reality of it. And I don't know how this promotion will overcome that. Even though I think they're doing some things right, and the Dragongate network has become more accessible. There's English commentary. I think it's the wrong time to venture in. And the Mocchy stuff was cool. I'm glad it happened. I hope Mocchy feels like he got an appropriate or at least a warming response in America, but not something that I expect a lot more of in 2024.
Yeah, I just think that other than people kind of wanting to do it, I don't see it necessarily as like this beachhead. Like, and it was one of those things like coming out of 2022 case, we kind of felt the same way. It just felt like it's kind of repeated itself again this year.
Yeah, very much so. So that is what we've got in terms of a bunch of other bullshit. Let's talk about the fact that we have an Open the Dream Gate match set for Final Gate 2023, Mike.
Buddy, we have a full card for the Final Gate 2023. But yeah, let's talk about the Dream Gate match up first. Three-way match. It was set at the Corcoran Hall show from last week. I have a written review up at voicesofwrestling.com. Madoka Kakuta will be defending, and it will be against Shun Skywalker, but it will also be against Louise Monte. We have the first three-way Dreamgate match in over a decade.
Off the bat, your thoughts when you saw this announced?
I thought that, and I wrote about this in a review, this might be a little too cute by half for some people, the idea of this, but it allows them to kind of find a way to move everything around and let Skywalker enter 2024 as champion, still have Skywalker and Louise Monte up ahead of you, and do it in a way where no matter what, Kakuta is going to look a little worse after he drops the belt, but he doesn't have to take the loss, I guess. I think if they're able to pull it off, and if we're able to this time next year when we're talking about Final Gate 2024, we're talking about like, man, they actually managed to pull it off there with those steps with the three-way at Final Gate last year. I think that if there's a level of difficulty here, Case, I think, with this, and a little bit of perhaps they're being a little too cute by half, but I think that there's something here to this. I think that it's actually a pretty smart idea. That at least was my response immediately after, and I think it's something in the time after that where it does feel like it's another instance of a little bit of marginalizing Kakuta. But I think that kind of is where we've come to.
Okay. That is where we differ. I think you're largely on the money here, but I actually think this three-way match might be the best thing that could have happened to Madoka Kakuta. And I am the opposite of a lot of people. I actually think on paper, this is the right match to book. Where I worry about it, and where I don't know if they'll be able to pay things off, is in the execution of this match. And we can talk about that in just a second. But you're kind of put in this scenario where, let's say you do Kakuta versus Ben, or even, wishful thinking you do Kakuta versus Doi. It might be hot. The crowd might be into it. But you know what, Mike, I think you would agree the focus of this promotion, the driving force right now, is Shun versus Monte. Would you agree with that?
As soon as Shun cost Louise Monte the mask, the new story became this one, and it just was when they were going to pay it off. This has been the story since July.
So you don't want to do what you did at World, where Kakuta came in cold, and he came in the second most hyped match, and then he had a bit of a dud, a bit of a match that wasn't as good as it should have been. And you don't want to do what you did in August, where it felt like, Minoru won King of Gate and then somehow overnight cooled off and the Dangerous Gate match was cold. And, you got lucky with Gate of Destiny. I think they told that Shimizu story well, but Kakuta beat Shimizu, so you have to continue the story with Kakuta. You don't want to put him in a situation where you're doing, again, Kakuta versus Ben, but there's a Shun Monte match on this show, whether it's a singles match or a tag match of some sort, where that's what people are more excited about. I think actually getting him in the mix here is the right thing to do. Again, we're going to look back at this Kakuta run. It'll be the single biggest asterisk on a Dreamgate reign since the Yamato 2016-2017 run, which was interrupted by Summer Adventure Tag League and then Tozawa retiring. And by the time we got through that, I was already sick of the title run, and that's before he defended versus Cyber Kong twice. That Yamato run was doomed to fail from the start. And I think they did everything right getting Kakuta the belt, but this run was kind of doomed to fail from the Yoshioka match. I think they set him up to fail with a lousy story and a second fiddle main event on the biggest show of the year. And it doesn't matter what he does. That reign is just not going to be what it should have been. So attaching him to the hottest thing in the company, I don't think is a bad idea. The problem, and I'll ask you what you think is best before I go over a few possible scenarios, is I just don't know how they get out of this without one person looking extremely dumb. I think it's the right match on paper, but logistically, I'm really worried about the finish.
Yeah, that's where I think it's going to require a little bit of deafness to it, because I think that if you're able to do perfect world, what you do is you have Skywalker beat Luis Monte in some fashion there, so you're building up more momentum to get Luis wanting to get Shun one-on-one. He can have like a visual pin on the Super Tigre. He can get that in the lead up there. You give him the very visual pin, but he should lose there. And I think that's you can't have Kakuta take the fall, basically. I think you have someone there in Monte where you have this match as a way not to have the big match here. Like that's the thing. It's like we're going to have Shun Skywalker and Luis Monte one-on-one for the Dreamgate sometime in 2024. It's just it's taking it down the notch it needs to take down to be able to build it back up again, and doing it in a manner that does not completely just trip yourself over when you're trying to build back up next May into probably Luis Monte, Shun Skywalker, Kobe World 2024.
Do we think the worst scenario to come out of this is Monte winning the Dreamgate belt?
No. I think that it's something where it's going to really, really put the onus on his challengers, I feel like, to carry the bulk of the booking. I think that it will make things a little difficult, but I think the worst result is Kakuta just pinning Skywalker again.
Okay, see, that's where I disagree. I actually think that's the route they're going to go down. I think the worst thing you can do here is have Monte blow his Dreamgate wad on a three-way match in a quite literally cold Fukuoka building. It's a very risky venture. Even though they've done a three-way match at this show before for the Dreamgate belt, I think it's a really risky venture in a building that is just, it's cold no matter what. Like the crowd, it's a famous thing in Dragon Gate. The Fukuoka crowd will show up. They'll be there. They just are not going to make a lot of noise. For whatever reason, this is not a hot crowd. I think it's a dangerous move, a risky move, to try to tell a story-driven three-way match the way they're going to. But I think the worst thing you can do is have Monte win in a three-way match, whether you pin Shun or Kakuta. I just think that's a terrible move. Save it. He's not going anywhere. I don't think he's going to get any colder. Save that moment.
Yeah, I just think that you just really like extending this Kakuta title run at this point is going to start causing damage. And I think that that's long term more of a hazard than what I think we would agree would probably be a shorter Monte first title run. You couldn't see him having it much deep into 2024. Would you?
No, but I think that kind of ties into, something else I was thinking about, which, look, if Shun wins the belt here, which I don't think is impossible. I mean, quite honestly, I advocated for it. I wanted Shimizu to beat Kakuta, and I wanted Shun to beat Shimizu at this show. I thought it would have solved a lot of problems. But if you have Shun win here, tell me if you think this matters. He will now be a 3-time Dreamgate champion. That'll be more reigns than Doi or Susumu, and that'll tie him with Shima and Mochizuki. And it's why I think they might not go back to Shun here, is even though I think he deserves it, even though I would put him certainly in the upper echelon of Dragon Gate wrestlers historically, and I think anybody that's watched him over the last few years that has a clue would understand that, he's been the best Dragon Gate wrestler going back to probably 2019, at the very least 2020. Are we ready to say that Shun Skywalker is a 3-time Dreamgate champion? Do you think that matters, and do you think they might prevent him from winning because of that?
I think in the greater scheme of things, Shun Skywalker, 3-time Dreamgate champion, is an inevitability. So it is something where it might be more so just the recency, where it'd be like, wow, that was 3 title wins in less than 3 years for him. Or really, I mean, we're talking end of 3 years basically for him. So I wonder, like, if that's a real big consideration. Personally, for me, I think that the fact that, he came back, got the face run, and that was like a full-throated baby face, like, let's like build up this guy into the future, that allowed you to do the second run, which basically was the Kakuta story, and then now you can do the Monte story, and I think it'll be fine. I think that it's a legitimate thing to think about, but one way or another, he's going to have that. I mean, I would not be surprised if he's someone we're talking about 4 or 5. I don't know if he's going to break Yamato with 6 at this point, but he's going to be up there. So it's just mattering when they want to cross that line.
And I think he should. The thing that I go back to with Shun, in both the show-to-show analysis of it and the big picture of it, as I start submitting Wrestler of the Year list, I had Shun as the 3rd best wrestler in the world this year, behind Ospreay and behind Danielson. And the reason is that I think Shun elevates people in a way that very few other wrestlers do. Dragon Gate has a through line of consistency that is very high. The working standard here, as you and I talk about all the time, the working standard here is higher than it is in most other promotions. But the working standard with Shun Skywalker is much higher than it is throughout the rest of this promotion. And I think he's a guy that, again, all year I've kind of advocated, like, maybe we should put the belt back on him. And I think I'd be okay with that if he pins Kakuta coming out of this show. But I also think there's a real possibility that they are simply trying to link Kakuta to the hottest program there is in the company, and that he's going to pin Shun, and that he is going to go on. And I really think it's surface level analysis. I think it's a little too simplistic to knock Kakuta for not being the hottest thing in the company at this point. Again, I think you have to go back to the Kobe World program, which I said that's the match to do. I just would have done it entirely different than the way that they built it. But now you're talking about a guy who's combating years and years of story, a Mascara contra Mascara cage match. There are just bigger factors at play with Shun and Monte that are going to lead to that being a bigger story. I think it's really too simplistic to be like, well, he's the world champion, he should be the hottest thing in the company. They might be doing him a favor by linking him with Shun and Monte here, and not trying to have him get overshadowed again through what I feel is no fault of his own.
Yeah, like, at the end of the day, I just think that he's been booked horribly. Like, this is not him. Because we've seen, especially with the Shimizu storyline, and
the Shimizu match was great. The Shimizu match was everything we've asked for.
Yeah, if we walked out of Osaka case and Kakuta laid a complete egg, there would be all the justification in the world to go, like, maybe, in retrospect, that the Minoura, everything from Minoura, like, he should have been able to carry up that end of Minoura. I mean, Minoura has been the golden boy. That's someone that you should be able to get across that line. Or Yoshioka has been the guy, he has been the main character, you should be able to get him past that line. Like, if he stank in Osaka, that would be a legitimate conversation. I just think that it's at a point with him where you continue with this, where you're basically like, yes, Case, absolutely. They are putting him on a leash to the hottest thing in the company, because in the last year, whenever he's been attached to the hottest thing in the company, or when he's been the hottest thing in the company, great things happen. But what's going to happen after that? If he gets the win on Skywalker, then we're looking into January. Are we really going to keep on doing this, where we're going to have another a weak January with Kakuta in an aimless Dreamgate program that he's booked into? It's not him. It's never been a question of effort.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you now have Gate of Bayside at the end of January. You're going to have to fill that building with a real match, with a real headlining match. We would all assume a Dreamgate match. You don't have to do that in Wakayama, but you've got to do something in January now, and that's not something Dragon Gate is used to. It's not something they've really ever had to do. So, if you want to power through and put your head down with Kakuta, I think that's an option. If you want to start fresh with Shun and do, Shun versus Yoshioka, Shun versus Mocchy, Shun versus whoever the fuck, I also think that's an option. Anybody but Monte here, and I think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I guess I just had a chill case that they're going to do that they would do Kakuta versus Kai at Bayside and not really do much build whatsoever. That's my fear.
Mike, I think I that might be it. That would not surprise me at all, because when's the last time Kai hasn't wrestled for the belt since he lost it, right?
No, he hasn't.
And who did he lose it?
He lost to Yoshioka 2 years ago.
Yeah, World. Yeah, that's okay. Well, that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah,
and they'll do vibes. I'm sorry, not vibes. They'll do, Monte and Hyo and maybe a third versus Zebrats, and that'll be it. I think that's the front runner right now, unless because again, it would be such a waste to do Monte versus Kai, only because he shouldn't win the belt in a 3-way. It's just that is so short-sighted and unnecessary. But I think if you're Dragon Gate, you can sell yourself on, if we do Kakuta versus Kai, that's a safe match. Then we just got to get to Osaka, and Osaka's low pressure, and maybe they get the belt off Kakuta and Osaka, and then you can really heat up something for Aichi. You're talking about really 2 more defenses before Dead or Alive that you need, and if you do him versus Kai, I think it's really safe.
Yeah, It is something then that eventually at a point you wonder, is it actually the business, it's been up and down with him. So there's not something really telling us you got to get the belt off him. The houses are tanking. If anything, the company is now strong enough that Hyo gave them the strongest Cork and Hall show that they've had since Kness retired. The company is not in awful circumstances, but the champion is someone who's very up and down.
Yeah, I mean, look, the last Corkin number was just about on par with what they did in December of 2019.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And I've said this before, but what's lost in the pandemic is, how big some of the Dragon Gate houses were in 2020. I mean, they were really ramping up to a special level, that hadn't been seen since the OWE Exodus, that, obviously they just got wiped away. Nobody thinks about January, February 2020 attendance figures, but no, the Hyo house was, again, it's a monumental win. I mean, we're talking about specific New Japan shows and specific All Japan shows that do better than that, and that's it.
Yeah, but it is something where the company's in this kind of bolstered spot because of that. And it's not at Kakuta's benefit, I guess, is what I'm getting to. And it's not, I just wonder, if it's something where are they just constantly trying to restart the engine with Kakuta case? That's where I'm kind of coming to the conclusion, they constantly just think he needs a jump start.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a problem with the Dreamgate belt. It just feels like there's constant tension there when you think about this era of Dragon Gate. You can go back to the Shun run where depending on who you ask, it was either this actually super underrated run or it was this cursed run where everybody got hurt and, you have the Benkei concussion and you have the Kakuta injury and you have this and that. I think you and I thought it was, this great run. And then you had this Yamato reign where I just remember every month there would be tension because it was like, all right, Yamato gets through Minoura. What the hell are they going to do next? Oh, it's going to be BB Hulk. Weird. Okay, they get through Hulk. What the hell are they going to do next? Oh, they're going to do Benkei. Okay, all right, well, now they're going to do Kai. That one at least makes sense, and then Kai wins. And then when your first defense is Kai versus Takashi Yoshida, you sort of have to go, well, wait a minute. What are they doing with my Open the Dreamgate Championship belt? Kai turns out to be an okay champion. Yoshioka, I thought, did everything right. Shun's reign was so short that it doesn't matter. And now we're back to this tension that you had with Shun and you had with Yamato and you had with Kai. We're just on 3 years, basically, of us going, what the hell are they doing with the Open the Dreamgate Championship? But I think the perception of this company to lapsed fans would be drastically different if we had more reigns like the Yoshioka one, where month to month we kind of knew where things were going, we knew what the champion's purpose was, and the matches were great. And even if the matches are great a lot of the time, over the last 3 years, there's just been a lot of question marks over the most important thing in the promotion.
Yeah, and the wild thing about the Yoshioka run, like if we want to kind of take the other side of this, is Yoshioka's run was not universally loved either. Like, I know I was a big proponent of Yuki Yoshioka, whereas I look at Yamato's runs recently, I kind of go towards it. But Yoshioka is not a dissimilar wrestler, and that run was not dissimilar from how Yamato's early runs were solidifying him. And I know that there was a backlash to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's fair. I don't think you're wrong for saying that. I also just think the people that didn't like Yoshioka's reign were largely wrong. I mean, it was great. It served a purpose, had a through line story. I was very, very baffled by people that weren't into that Yoshioka reign. Just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
It is something where if I was not so questioning about Yamato, I would have been exactly at the same spot as you are, Case. But since I'm someone that I just thought, I think there is an issue sometimes with the kind of just white meat babyface ace champion that happens sometimes with Dragongate. And
the
I think
promotion's never booked it well. Historically, it's never, I mean, you have the Mocchy run, you have the Shima run, and 2011, and then 2012 and beyond, respectively. But it's not their thing. You think about the heel Yamato runs, you think about the heel Shingo runs, you think about what Pac did, what Eita did very briefly. Even I think very fondly of Kai's run. That's the sort of stuff that seems to resonate, and they don't always nail these babyface champions. And Kakuta, I really think when you watch him in these 6-man tags, now these 8-man tags with Tanaka joining the fold, it's the Madoka Kakuta that we loved in 2022, that we loved in the first half of 2023. It's when they get him by himself that it just seems like Dragongate loses the plot, and thus they lose Kakuta in what normally makes him so special.
Well, Case, one champion that I don't think the company has lost the plot with whatsoever as a babyface is the new Open the Bravegate champion. Since we didn't have a show last week, we can kind of talk about the title win for One Hyo, defeating Ishin at Korakuen Hall. Follows that up with a defense in Saitama against Jackie Funky Kamei. And booked on the Kyoto show from this weekend, we have a new Bravegate challenger up ahead for Hyo as well. Genki Horiguchi getting Hyo in Fukuoka on the 24th.
I gotta say, I said for about a year as we were just anticipating whatever the Hyo turn was going to be, I knew it was going to be a smash hit. I knew he was going to be over. I knew he was going to look great. I didn't expect it to be like this, where I don't want to say he's stealing Monte's thunder, but oh my God, does he come across like a megastar in some of these matches.
It just feels like, oh wow, there were moments as Hyo fans before he turned heel out of Mochizuki Dojo where he would get some crowd response and be like, okay, there could be something there. Maybe he's going to be an enduring kind of baby face. Like, you're like, oh, this is kind of the thing you want to see from a guy of his size. Maybe the crowd latches on to him and he's going to be like a Ginky kind of figure. Like you heard that for like a while. Then he goes and he has this heel run. And Case, I think he kind of has taken the momentum out of Luis Monte's kind of sails a little bit, just if only because now with how the act is around Big Hug so much, I think that is just something that the crowd has like really latched onto Hyo, it seems.
Yeah, and look, Monte's not doing himself any favors with the bad Ichiban promos, and we didn't really talk about the segment that led to the three-way with GM Saito and, Shun and Kakuta and Monte. I don't think it was very good. I don't think it was horrible, but I didn't think that was a major win. So I think Monte is doing the right things in the ring. I think as a wrestler, he comes across great, but Hyo is just this special charismatic package that is really hard to describe until you see it. And part of it, and this might sound dumb, he's got the best handspring of any wrestler I've ever seen. And there is something about that with his look where it's just like, all right, I'm locked in on this guy. I want to cheer for this guy. I want to root for this guy. I want to see what he does next. And this Bravegate run, it's interesting going back through the lineage of this title this year, where you have Ishin make a really big deal at where did he win at World? Ishin make a really big deal about, he wants to be thought of as a Pac or a Ricochet or a Dragon Kid, one of these guys that brings great prestige to this title. I don't know if that happened, but I think this Hyo reign, with how over he is and the possibility of new challengers, I think this could be a very special Bravegate run.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a way that it's not one-to-one because Hyo has been Bravegate champion before, but remember how Dr. Muscle KZ as Bravegate champion, like when he turned face and was like, oh, KZ's now Bravegate champion, joining Diehards, like in that way, there was like, we'll see where this goes for this. And it had some legs for it as long as like KZ remained healthy for that time period. And then they got the belt off him. And I think he got hurt soon after, weirdly enough. But it's something that I look at Hyo, and it's something where he's closer to like his 10th year anniversary than he is his 5-year anniversary. He is someone that has had this career on the undercard, and just through his creativity has been able to redefine himself so much over the last 30 months that I think that you have someone who has formed this huge and legitimate crowd connection that at the very least it allows everyone, face or heel, to kind of like step up and get a match there, and it resets the division because you have someone who is just this kind of overcome in there and kind of wash things away. And I feel like that is the thing that it kind of offers more so than like a legacy defining or promised title run that Ishin did, where Ishin's matches were fine, but by and large, it felt like that the matches were more of a purpose of elevating Ryoya Tanaka or something like that. Whereas this time, it's just kind of like where the matches are in purpose of so far. Well, it's because Hyo is just really fucking over. That's what they're in purpose of.
Yeah, Hyo is going to be the star of his own run, whereas even though the build-up to Ishin was that, he ended up serving a different purpose throughout most of those matches. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. I mean, like, case in point, the Tanaka match.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't see Hyo having any of those. And I think the nice thing is, even though this is Hyo's second run with the Bravegate belt, his matches during his first run. So he won the belt from Dragon Dia. He then defended it versus SB Kento in what turned out to be Kento's last Dragongate match, and then a Jason Lee defense, and then a Dragon Kid defense, and then a T-Lon Shisa defense, all before losing the belt to Minorita. So let's scratch Minorita from the record. Let's scratch T-Lon Shisa from the record. Let's scratch SB Kento from the record. And I don't see Dragon Kid challenging anytime soon. So at worst, you're running back Dia and or Jason Lee, both of which I would be okay with. And then you have fresh picking after that. Then you can throw anybody his way, and I think it's going to be worthwhile. The only bummer is that Ishin's the only heel that they can throw his way right now. They don't have another smaller heel, and I think that might hurt them. I'd like to see Hyo do another just traditional babyface heel defense, but I don't know if we're going to get that.
Yeah, that is kind of the big thing I've always been saying about Z-Brats is that you don't have another person ready in the offing to kind of be like, okay, you shouldn't drop the belt. I'm right here, ready to be the next one up there. Because I do think that for this Hio run to be successful, and I think arguably we could say 7 days in case, complete success. Like it is something where this belt, which has been, I think you can look back across the last 100 episodes case, and if you run an AI through it, you're probably going to ask it, what does VoiceGate think about the Bravegate? And we're going to say, it's going to say they're not very sure about it, but I think we feel pretty good about it. Like 1 weekend, it's just, I wish he had that next up heel that just because of how the unit construction is right now in Dragongate and how it's been for the last 15 months, let alone like last year, the heel side has been so thin that we don't have the opportunity, and that stinks.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I thought the Kamei match came across very well. I like the work that he did there. And now we're set up for a Genki Horiguchi defense at Final Gate 2023. What are your thoughts there?
So I thought that it's something with like let's be honest about Hio. He's never going to be a work rate guy, but I still walked away from both the matches over the last 2 weeks with I think I was 3.5 for JFK, and then I was 3 3/4 for the written review there. I think actually the Genki match has kind of more potential than those two, if only because of the momentum we're seeing with Genki on this 25th anniversary tour. So I'm really stoked for it.
If Genki has anything left in the tank, and I'm not entirely sure he does for a singles match, but if he has anything left in the tank, it's going to come out of that Hio match, and it could end up being really special. I will say it just quickly in regards to Hio being a work rate guy, the biggest takeaway from the Ishin match, which I was the same rating as you, 3 3/4 and then 3.5 for the Jack match. I'm glad, by the way, they listened to us and gave Kamei a Bravegate match after we talked about that 2 weeks ago, where I was like, man, this guy really needs a Bravegate match.
Yeah.
They're like, what if we throw it on a random house show? I was like, all right, good enough for me.
What about Saitama?
Yeah, oh yeah, big crowd. So the thing with Hio that I took away was that I really want to see, and Big Hug is still a guy or two away from this. I am ready for another trios 4-way match, or four guys, 4 teams, 16-man tag team match. I'm ready for a big traditional Dragon Gate multi-man match where you get Tanaka in there and you get Hio in there. I just feel like we're at a point where Hio could steal the fucking show in a Korakuen main event in one of these vintage traditional Dragon Gate tag team matches. And watching the Ishin match, he just has that crowd control where he could be in there with Yamato, with Shun, with Kai, with whoever. And I kind of still think Hio would be the guy that the crowd would focus their emotion on more than anybody else.
Yeah, it is something where I know that it has not been the case for a long time, or at least it's felt like a long time. Hio right now and the traditional Doi Darts match, that's where you get to see someone have some real Magnum Tokyo just charisma monster moments.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a great comp. I'm really ready to see what he does next time he's in Tokyo when he's in the ring with Shun Skywalker. And I don't know, I forget the card for the upcoming Cork off the top of my head. Let me check that real quick just to see what they're doing there. That is on the 19th, so that's next week. And on that show, Hio is... That's right, main event. Hio and Monte versus Shun Skywalker and Kai. I would expect the Hio Skywalker interactions on that show to be absolutely mental. I think the crowd is going to be so into those guys together.
yeah, and it's something where I've kind of liked since the turn and a little bit on the Kyoto show, getting to see kind of these fun class of 2016 alignments now that we kind of have the 4 of them on completely different sides for once. Like you can have Benkei in gold class, you have Yoshioka, of course, and D Courage, and then you have Shun staying with Z-Brats and Hio going his own way. It's a nice little thing to kind of go back to it now, where it looked like we got basically 2 years of Hio and Shun on the same side, and now they're all separate again.
That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, all of these guys are in a different phase of their career, and they all matter, which is incredible. You think they're 4 of the 5 guys from that graduating class, and the fifth one retired less than a year into his career. But for those 4 guys to be where they are now, that is, again, class of 2016 will probably go down as the single greatest class in Dragon Gate history.
Yeah, and like you look at it just from like where they are, and the 3 top matches in Corkin next weekend. Next week you have a gold class match 5. So there's Benkei. You have D Courage in match 6. So there's Yoshioka, and then you have Hyo and Skywalker in the main event. There, it's really neat, and especially for someone like Skywalker and not Skywalker, someone like Hyo, who for the entire existence of this class, Hyo has by far been in last. It's just he was far behind, and now that it's just something, it's like, oh yeah, now he's the one that's like the biggest star at this moment, is really kind of wild to think about.
I agree. So props to Hyo. I'm looking forward to the Genki match. We'll talk about that more next week when we. I guess we won't record next Tuesday because there's a Corkin, so we'll be available later in the week to do a Corkin review and a Final Gate preview. And I'm very excited for his Brave Gate defense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's keep on talking about the title matches that we now have set up there. Okay, so you said you have an interesting note we had at that Corkin show. D Courage, Yuki Yoshioka, and Dragon Dia have been calling for outside challengers. Yoshioka made it known that he was kind of a little miffed that he did not get to face off against Kaito Kiyomiya in the N1 victory. Alejandro showed up at Corkin and accepted the challenge, and it's going to be the original pairing of D Courage, Yuki, and Dia defending the Twin Gate at the Final Gate versus Kaito Kiyomiya and Alejandro.
First of all, not into this at all. Don't care for this at all. Not into this match. What about you?
Yeah, it's something where Kaito Kiyomiya as like this Noah ace who's really not around in Noah whatsoever, and when he's in Noah, he's teaming with a New Japan young lion and not really there. It's very. It's one of those years that in a decade, like thinking about Kaito Kiyomiya's 2023 is going to be a acid flashback one way or another. I like seeing Alejandro, but this pairing, the way they've set up this match, it's a way to get a Noah guy on the show.
Yeah, so my antennas are up with Noah right now, just on a lot of different things. I don't know this to be certain, but I just imagine there's a lot of internal panic in Noah right now because I think they realize they wasted 4 years with Muto and they have nothing to show for it, and no one's over, and they might lose Kiyomiya, and it's a very rough time for the promotion. So when this match was announced, I reached out to Dragongate I reached out to somebody within Dragongate rather, because I was just very, very curious to see how this came about, because you have to remember all of the Dragongate Noah stuff last year. Noah paid for all of that. Anytime a Noah guy was on a Dragon Gate show, it was paid for by Noah. The Noah Dragon Gate joint show last year was a Noah venture. They have money. Dragon Gate needs money. Noah needs exposure. Dragon Gate has exposure. So I was just very curious to see what was up with this match. And I was told basically, that the prevailing thought here is that it's not like last year's deal. This is a barter agreement. Basically, Noah paying back Dragon Gate for getting Yoshioka for the N1, so they get Kiyomiya. And then it's also important to note that Alejandro is actually from the Fukuoka area, so hometown guy there. That's why he's in this match. So it is not what I initially suspected, which was Noah basically paying to play and paying for exposure, but just rather a payoff from the N1 agreement that was set up earlier in the year.
And Alejandro is also there to take the fall.
Alejandro's there to take the fall. Hometown guy, their hope is that he can sell some tickets that way. And I don't know. I'm not into the match. I've never been a Kiyomiya guy. I know it's a popular opinion now. I have never been a Kiyomiya guy. Never got him. Never pegged him as an ace. And I don't really think he's going to do well in Dragon Gate. I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's just going to be like the weird dissonance that happens with Kaito Kiyomiya in 2023 when it's not Kazuchika Okada across the ring from him. Like, that's the thing, Case. Like, there's nothing to this guy unless Okada is there, and Okada gets to do his mad at youngsters routine.
Look, it's never been my thing. I don't know. Maybe Yoshioka will pull something out of him. I do think Yuki Yoshioka might be the most underrated wrestler of 2023. I think this might be the best year of his career. And maybe with all of those things considered, he'll make Kiyomiya interesting, but I would not put money on it.
That's not a Galaxy View prediction there. I think that's pretty fair to say. Also happening within the last few weeks, circling back to this, on the Cork and Hall show, we had 2 new foreigners show up. Viento from Pro Wrestling Revolution out of California, along with Demus, who was also in the country working for DDT. Viento has been kind of unaffiliated, but has been on the face side, and Demus naturally has been a Z-Brat's side, filling out the heel side. When we heard about Demus coming in, it did not pass our smell test. I reached out and talked to people, and I was like, really, is this happening? And at the time, at least Mexico side, people were like, that's what we're hearing. And I wonder if it is something where there's like a shared ticket, or he's still in the country, basically. That's just my own feeling. That's not reporting.
Yeah, look, when I saw the Demas quote that Cubs fan reported about Demas working in Dragongate, I just assumed Demas was wrong. I just assumed that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. I think that was everyone's kind of like, really? Or is this someone just saying stuff to say stuff?
Yeah, I just assumed he had the wrong promotion, that he showed up in DDT, and I was like, well, he had the wrong promotion. Nope, turns out working in Dragongate, and my big takeaway from, we have the Corkin match on the 5th and the house show on the 6th, and then they'll be back a little bit later this month. I could do without seeing Demas in a Dragongate ring ever again.
Yeah, he stinks. At least in the Dragongate context, it does not work. It does not work.
Viento's a guy I'd keep around. I don't think he's going to. I think this is the only time we'll see him, but there's at least something there.
I have liked Viento more here than I have liked watching Dragongate wrestlers wrestle him when they are in North America.
I don't know if I had ever seen him before.
He's a West Coaster. He was in the tournament that he was in the King of the Indies tournament that SB Kento somehow became a finalist.
Okay, then I have seen him.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing with him is that, like, I think he's talented, and I think if he wanted to work for no money whatsoever, I think Dragongate would keep him on shows. But you know the difference between, like, when Diamante started working in Dragongate compared to Viento, there was a focus on Diamante immediately, much to our chagrin initially. And this is more so, it feels like guys hanging out. And I don't think Dragongate takes them seriously, and I don't think they're going to be seen going forward.
Yeah, and the one thing that actually helps out Demus is that Dragongate really needs heel wrestlers, and that allows them to then suddenly have 5 heels on a show.
Yeah, they'll be back at that Corkin show. I'm looking at it right now. Oh boy, I forgot about this. It is Ultimo Dragon and Viento versus Demos and Super Crazy.
I forgot that Super Crazy's coming in.
Man, I gotta say, I was the biggest Super Crazy defender up until about 2 or 3 years ago, and my man is finally washed. So I know he showed up last year. I know he worked 1 or 2 Dragongate matches, and it's I guess it's Ultimo's Christmas present.
You know that, like, there'll be a time that Joe Gagne gets back around to doing a Dragongate episode, 5-star match game, and he's going to read off Corkin shows. And just in case Joe's listening to the episode, make sure you save this one, because there'll be a 3-match stretch of Jackie Funky Kamei versus Ishin, Ultimo Dragon and Viento versus Super Crazy and Demus, and then Gold Class versus Original M2K. That will completely throw us for a loop in 2034.
Joe Gagne, if you're listening to this, I am ready to once again do my 2023 year-end 5-star match game show with Alan Forel and Rich Craich, if you choose to do so. I would be more than happy to hop on that again this year. I feel like I know less about wrestling than ever before, And that show's fun to do. So I'm hoping I can do it again. If we're going to talk to Joe Gagney directly, who normally listens, I might as well throw that out there. It's a fun time. I like sitting around the campfire, the Christmas fire, the Yuletide log, and reminiscing on the year in wrestling when I don't watch most of the major promotions.
Yeah, last year, Case, I stepped in for Rich, and I thought that I was going to go 3 straight 5-star match game victories, and Alan somehow cockily handed me my ass.
Well, I don't know. Was last year the year that Alan rattled off like Intercontinental champions?
You know, I'm trying to erase this loss from my
that might
memory.
have been 2 years ago that
Yeah.
secret closeted Fed fan Alan, I'm sure he runs the AEW Botches account in secret, was just like, or here's the list of Intercontinental champions this year, and it wasn't just The Miz. God, it was disgusting. I couldn't believe it.
Next up, he's just going to list off a whole bunch of Antonio Roca opponents from Madison Square Gardens and win it this year.
that I would at least respect that. I would at least that's historical. I like that.
Yeah. Speaking of historical, we're starting to see some historical specialness out of one Ryoya Tanaka case. You got to see, at least at the beginning of last month, we saw the turn, the joining to D-Courage coming out of Gate of Destiny. How are you feeling about Tanaka now, full month into D-Courage?
I think everything he does is must watch. He, over the last month, I think has been the most interesting guy in the company, sort of nudging out Shun, nudging out Yoshioka, nudging out Kakuta. Everything he does right now, I think, is really engaging. The 8-man D-Courage matches continue to just hit in a major way. And I gotta say, we saw him, and I'll emphasize it one more time, just, little by little, every match he was getting better. He didn't have that big standout performance like a Takuma Fujiwara did versus Dragon Dia. Now he's having those on the regular, and now it's just a matter of people catching up to him. Maybe they saw him at World this year, maybe they saw him at Dangerous Gate or just on the off cork, and if you haven't seen the last month of Dragongate and you're behind, the next time you see Tanaka, it's going to blow your mind, because the elevation, the steps that he's made over the last month are surreal.
He's become one of the crisper baby faces in peril on the roster.
Yeah.
And I say that as like both in the he was always pretty good at getting his ass kicked. Like we knew before his elevation, before the Brave Gate match, that Ryoya Tanaka could take a beating. Like that's something that if you're a Dragon Gate rookie and you stick around long enough, we assume that at a certain point you're going to be really good at engendering sympathy when you're getting beat down. What I did not realize is that when he comes in as a house of fire and on offense, that he is one of the more crisp flyers that we've seen in a long time, and especially in a company that I feel like it's been a long time since we've had a real crisp high flyer. Ryoya Tanaka has one of the better Tope con Halos that I've seen in recent years. Like he has his body control down pat. It is something that I've been wanting a flyer like Ryoya Tanaka for a long time.
I thought it was so interesting when we had Jay on over the summer. He talked about how, obviously losing Kento and Takuma really hurt, but especially in the case of Takuma, they felt like they were going to be okay because they had Ryoya Tanaka, and Tanaka, as he said, was just a better looking version of Fujiwara. And I got to say, there's still this shock and awe that Fujiwara brought, because nobody was expecting the 6 months that Fujiwara existed in Dragon Gate, which is crazy to think that's all it really was. Nobody was expecting him to take over the way that he did. With Tanaka, he came in with more hype, and it took him a little longer to find his footing. But I feel like we're really edging into that spot where the Fujiwara-sized void has been filled. And that was something that the company had been missing this year, was just, that young high flyer that could turn any show around, that could steal the show on any night. And yeah, Tanaka's kind of at that point. I mean, we talked about a month ago about the Dia Kakuta Yoshioka trio as being, at worst, probably one of the 3 best trios this promotion has ever had. And now you add in Tanaka, and they didn't miss a beat. If anything, D Courage only got stronger in terms of their match quality because Tanaka's not only adding a new wrinkle, but Tanaka's hanging with them, and he's hanging with them seemingly pretty easily.
And you know what the real fun has been over this month, Case? It's watching D Courage kind of figure out the chemistry or act like they're figuring out the chemistry. Whereas the November Corkin, it was something where it's like that was like, oh, they don't necessarily are on the same page. No, it was the match in Yamaguchi that they had against Z-Brats, and it's a full Atomico machine. It's fantastic, and it's something where it's going to be so fun seeing how this foursome kind of changes over times, because what's going to happen if you decide to go, all right, the gun show is going to be Kakuta, Daya, and Tanaka, and what is that trio going to look like in 6 months? And I feel like it's going to be something completely vibrant and different from like original D Courage and Tanaka. And there's just a lot of possibilities here that I think that the company is going to find out pretty soon, that like getting him to this point, and it's something where like you do see some people like Nagano and Yanagiuchi not getting in those positions at the point, but I think about the time that we've lost with Nagano and with that, and Daiki's kind of has his role there, and instead, like, this is kind of where I feel like Tanaka is destined to be, in a way.
Yeah, look, he's doing everything right now. Like I said, I think everything is must watch. If you missed the 8-man tag on December 9th, that is on YouTube. I went 4.25 on that. And then without Tanaka, the main event for the 12:10 Kyoto show, which was just D Courage versus Z-Brats, I went 4 stars on that. So I would highly recommend watching both of those.
Yeah, I think like the best thing that the company has had, at least over the last week, was that Yamaguchi 8-man tag. I was 4 flat on that as well. Case, anything else you were wanting to touch on this week?
I don't believe so.
Oh, I had one last note. This happened on the Kyoto show. As they came back from intermission, they announced the return of Prime Zone. Prime Zone is returning in 2024, Case, as they will be returning to Kobe Lapis Hall, trying to see where the first one was announced for. But it's returning for the first time since COVID that they've had any Prime Zone shows. And it's interesting that it's coming back, especially at a time where I don't know if there's as much of a need of it. Do you see the need for Prime Zone right now?
Well, it's interesting. You know, I try to think about this from the perspective of, do I think that the current generation of Dragongate wrestlers have a charisma issue? No, I do not. But there are people out there that are not connecting with this new crop of talent, and they're not going to connect with them through Prime Zone. But Prime Zone, and I'll let you kind of describe it better than I will, but it's certainly going to give some of these young guys a chance to spread their wings as characters, and maybe some good comes of that.
Right. So I looked this up. Prime Zone returning January 23rd. There is all the episodes of Prime Zone currently up on the Dragongate network. So Prime Zone, for newer fans, started as Dragongate's first ever online only kind of offering that was straight from Dragongate. It was their tape shows from what was called the Sanctuary at that time in Kobe, in the building that had both the gym and everything in Kobe. It eventually moved over to Lapis Hall, and since then, what it ended up being over the years, trying to pull up this next one coming back will be Dragongate Studio Volume 86. So this will be the 86th one coming up for it. And what it did is it let people basically cut promos, develop characters, get time just in front of 50 to 100 people in the middle of the day and trying out things. And that worked also for people like Kota Minoura and others, like becoming interviewers, like basically forcing them to talk on the microphone and having to give reports and do stuff like this. you got things like that. Two, also on the other extreme, matches like how we've talked about for a long time, Super Shisa, like European style wrestling experiences, essentially, where he would have like matches against Martin Kirby, or UT is the one we always talk about. And it's a unique and different kind of Dragon Gate. And it's one that it's really for the benefit of younger roster members. And I guess the reason why I say I don't know if it's necessarily needed right now is when they had Prime Zone was a time where it was issues getting young guys on cards. And I don't know if that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think it's going to give Daiki a chance to spread his wings. It's going to give Kato a chance, likely to be a super cop. I'd be curious to see what somebody like Tanaka would do. And then the hope is that maybe a UT, finds, he takes over that Super Shisa role. My hope is that we just get cool Yave adjacent matches on this show, and I'll take the promos as they come. But I'm not going to complain about it. I think it's cool, and we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that they used to do on these tapings where they would do Prime Zone. Before that, they would have Dragon Gate Next, which was the precursor to the current Dragon Gate Future project, which would basically be, because we would talk to people who go to these Prime Zone Next shows, and what they would say is, oh, the next portion is all the rookies just chopping the piss out of each other for 45 minutes.
Oh boy, I get so excited whenever Next footage surfaces. There's not much of it out there, but I've got some stuff and I really enjoy it.
Maybe that's coming back as a part of it. Maybe they'll phase back out Future and then go for Next, because they won't necessarily need to have to do exhibitions on the road anymore. Did
you see the new crop of dojo kids that Susumu posted on his Twitter?
Yeah, there's one of the kids that that is like built like a square block.
He's built like fucking Ricky Dozan.
It's so cool.
The biggest barrel chest in all of wrestling. I can't wait to see him wrestle.
Yeah, so it's 3 that pass the test, and it is something where there's 3 of them. One of them is taller than him, and then the other 2 aren't. But there's one that seriously looks like could be in an episode of Gumby. Like, he is built like Ricky Dozan. It rules.
It's so funny because, something that I enjoy about watching old Dragon Gate is, you go back to 2004 and you could see Shingo as a young boy, and you go back to, 2019 and you could see Kakuta and Kabune and Kamei as young boys. It's just fun to see, what at one time were just nameless, faceless guys. Now they're stars, and now they're, you can see them as ringside attendants from when they were young boys. The wide kid stands out. I clock him every show. I know exactly where that guy's at.
Yeah.
In a way that there's just never really been a Dragon Gate rookie like that before.
Yeah, it is something where, like, I have a lot of questions about this guy. I really enjoy it.
He could be awesome just by doing the bare minimum in this promotion.
Yeah, I absolutely can't wait. Another great thing that's happening right now on Susumu's Twitter case, he's posting backstage photos of like everyone in like their rookie phase at their like homecoming shows, and you get to see like, do you remember Yuki Yoshioka used to wear bell bottoms, and that was like his only character trait was he had bell bottoms?
Yeah.
Wild time.
He's come a long way. I'll end on this. I said it, 20 minutes ago or whatever, but Yoshioka, for as much as we just praised Tanaka, in both the 8-man on 12-9 and then the 6-man on 12-10, I tell you, man, that guy just jumps through the screen in some of these multi-man matches, and he hasn't had the sexy year, he hasn't had the headlining year, but you think about what he did in Rey de Parejas, and then you think about his King of Gate, and specifically that match with Minoura and their hometowns, and then you see him finish out the year strong with D-Courage. Again, to me, Yoshioka is a top 10 wrestler this year. It's Skywalker, it's Kakuta, and then it's Yoshioka. Then if you want to have Shimizu or Kamei fall in line, go for it. But I think Yoshioka, again, I've got like 25 matches of his at 4 stars or higher this year, and most of those are trios matches. But man, he has delivered all year long. And because he's never really been the sole focus, no one talks about it. This has been the best year of his career.
Yeah, and it's something where like you like think about it, and it's passage of time that kind of hurts it. But we have to like think about, we entered this year with Yuki Yoshioka Dreamgate champion. We have that Shun Skywalker title change. We have the Rey de Parejas run with Madoka Kakuta. Like all these things happened this year for him. It's one of those things that it's perhaps the deepest resume that I would say probably outside of one or two people that anyone else has in the world. Like just like the depth and the variety to it. I mean, you're talking about like him and Ospreay, I feel like.
I think he's a tier 2 wrestler. You know, if you're going to put, you know, Ospreay, Danielson, Shun, Yume Oyagi, Kento Miyahara, Okada, that's kind of your tier 1. To me, Yoshioka's just behind them.
Yeah, and it's something where I think that it's more of who's on Yoshioka's level with him at that tier, because I do think that that he is kind of that step back, but I think his year is more interesting than Okada's. You know?
The thing is with Okada, and I talked about this with Jesse Collins about a month ago on his podcast, the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. The first 6 months of Okada's year were incredible, and then he unfortunately just got relegated to a bunch of nonsense after he lost the title. But Okada has had a better year than people realize. But Yoshioka's year might have been more interesting.
Yeah, like I'll give Okada credit. He had that match of Kiyomiya, which is still one of the most interesting things to happen all year. Just like,
yeah, very much so.
Yeah, like that is one of those things that, like, as I'm like thinking back on this, like I feel like as I'm watching the end of this GLEAT showcase, I'm wondering why I'm not rewatching that instead right now.
Well, that's a good place to end it, because I'm going to do a GLEAT catch up this upcoming week.
Buddy.
We'll record a few days later than normal. We'll get the Corkin review in. We'll do a Final Gate preview. And I think we'll talk some GLEAT next week. It'll be a good time.
I think it's almost like we have a holiday buffet in front of us.
It's going to be a good one.
Yep. Can't wait to do that. And thanks for everyone for listening to us this week. You can follow us on Twitter at OpenVoiceGate, cases at _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. Thanks for listening to Open Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week. We're looking at next Wednesday to talk about Dragon Gate's second Cork and Hall show in December, the preview for Final Gate. And we'll talk about some Tokyo Dome City Hall GLEAT preview. Have a good week, everyone. Take care.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.